privilege this morning to introduce our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Ambassador Caroline Kennedy, who's U.S. Ambassador to Canberra, to Australia. The Ambassador was appointed in July 2022, so it's been with us for 2 years, nearly 2 years, and prior to that she had a distinguished career as Ambassador in Tokyo. Ambassador Kennedy has also worked, spent a lot of her career working in education, and has also published quite a number of books, 11 books on law. Ambassador is a lawyer by trade, and we're particularly pleased to have her here to address the conference today. So please make the Ambassador very welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this important conference. I'm so excited to be back in WA, especially since I drove more than half of the way to get here. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. It's our responsibility to live up to the standard they have set as stewards of this land and transform our world to be greener, healthier, and more just. I'd like to thank the Paydirt organizers, Bill and Dominic, for inviting me and MT colleagues. And I want to thank Michael Sullivan, who's here, Ryan Prince, and Consul General Siri Nair, and all the Perth team for their support and expertise in helping me prepare for both the rally and this conference. They do it all. I didn't say it, don't worry. On my first trip to WA, I had the chance to visit iron ore mines in the Pilbara and see the huge ships loading up in Port Hedland. I went to the Lynas rare earth mine and the planned processing facility in Kalgoorlie, which has recently received its first, let me see if this works better, feed of ore from Mount Weld, and is ramping up operation throughout this year. So clear, okay. And I made sure to see Super Pit, where it all began. I learned a lot about wealth creation and the identity of this region in just a few hours. Seeing the past and future of mining in the same town is a powerful demonstration of WA's role in the world economy. And I was confronted by the tough question of whether and how we are going to preserve both our standard of living and our planet. Since you're all hearing a lot about battery minerals and rare earths, global sustainability and financing, I wanted to speak a little bit about the role the United States is playing in our vital partnership with Australia. First of all, I want to say on a personal level, it is the honor of a lifetime to serve my country abroad, especially here in Australia, our closest friend and ally. The centerpiece of President Biden's foreign policy is to strengthen and modernize. You know, I've been in the outback. Our alliances and solve global challenges together. And I see us doing that together every single day. In a time of conflict and division in the world, the U.S.-Australia alliance is something that we should never take for granted. It's a force for peace, stability, and prosperity that's been passed down to us by our parents and grandparents, brothers and sisters who have fought and sacrificed side by side and still do, so that we can work, study, and have fun together. We are both nations of immigrants with complicated histories of injustice. Yet despite our flaws, we have been and continue to be a force for good in the world. We provide peace and stability. We lead the world in scientific discovery and innovation. The United States is the largest humanitarian donor in the world, and Australia is our most vital partner and leading donor in the Indo-Pacific. We safeguard the international rules-based order, protecting freedom of navigation and trade routes through which all your materials travel. We promote and maintain high environmental and labor standards for our workers, and we're cooperating to prevent others from destroying our oceans and the remaining pristine ecosystems. For the past... Do we need this? For the past few decades, the alliance has been described primarily as a security and economic partnership and WA has long been at the center of that activity. Recent years have seen a growing number of visiting U.S. ships, and soon there will be state-of-the-art submarines, sailors and their families, and a growing industrial base and innovation ecosystem to support them. WA is also at the center of our economic partnership with cooperation in resource extraction, marine conservation, space and satellite technology, and autonomous vehicles, stemming from the expertise of the mining industry centered here. Last May, President Biden and Prime Minister Albanese declared climate change and clean energy the third pillar of the alliance by signing the Climate, Critical Minerals, and Clean Energy Transformation Compact and making WA's role even more important. The climate crisis is a global challenge which requires urgent international action. It's a national security and economic issue for our countries. It's an existential issue in this region and a moral issue for our generation. It's also a massive business opportunity. And no two countries are better positioned to benefit than the United States and Australia. It won't be easy, but we need to create the type of public-private synergy that will allow us to succeed. You all are at the very center of that effort. Better and faster communication between sectors and countries is critical to our success. So is action, and the United States is taking dramatic steps. In 2023, 40% of United States power generation was from clean sources, including 20% from solar, wind, and hydro. Just last week, the last coal plant in my home region of New England announced it would close in 2028, putting the U.S. within reach of ending the use of coal for energy generation by 2030 and reaching net zero emissions by 2050. And to recap, as you know, over the last couple of years, the U.S. has passed 3 landmark pieces of legislation to accelerate the global transition to a clean energy future. Taken together over the next 10 years, these laws will invest and incentivize an estimated $1.5 trillion into research and development, clean energy and electric vehicles, and infrastructure and supply chain security. The best known is the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, which in its first year has driven more than $110 billion in new clean energy manufacturing investments, including more than $70 billion in EV supply chains. This is in addition to the more than $400 billion for more than 40,000 specific projects funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law in its first 2 years. This includes $7 billion for battery manufacturing and processing, $7 billion for clean hydrogen, and billions more to electrify public transport and improve energy transmission. Perhaps most relevant to this audience, the IRA incentivizes the use of critical minerals from countries such as Australia, which have a free trade agreement with the United States. It has already stimulated more than $5 billion of U.S. investment into this country and Australian companies. U.S. automakers have secured more than 19 billion Australian dollars in offtake agreements here, and much more is coming. Our new climate and critical minerals cooperation has already started to yield results. I was privileged to be part of Prime Minister Albanese's official visit to the White House and take part in the first meeting of the Critical Minerals Task Force, led by Minister King and President Biden's Senior Advisor for Energy and Investment, Amos Hochstein. I also attended the Critical Minerals Roundtable with the PM and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, along with executives from companies represented here. In December, in addition to passing historic AUKUS legislation, the U.S. Congress declared Australian companies eligible for Defense Department funding on the same basis as their U.S. counterparts under our Defense Production Act. The Defense Department is already working with Australian companies in the U.S. and can now also provide significant funding for projects here in Australia for needs we cannot meet domestically. The U.S. is mobilizing a whole-of-government approach to secure critical mineral supply chains from trusted vendors with high ESG standards and worker protections. And perhaps the most significant long-term actions are the U.S.-Australia collaboration on supply chain mapping, standard setting on international price stabilization and transparency, exploring ways to streamline our regulatory frameworks and use public sector tools to more effectively de-risk, backstop, and incentivize private sector investment. Exim Bank has worked hard to redefine criteria to expand its cooperation with EFA and is looking for new projects in Australia. Just last month, Exim issued a $600 million letter of interest to Australian Strategic Minerals to finance U.S. content and services at ASM Dubbo project. Exim has already signed a letter of interest with Liontown, and hopefully another WA project will be next. I've told Exim Chair Lewis that Perth needs to be the first stop on her upcoming trip. Australia is also setting ambitious goals and working in multilateral fora to drive progress at both the federal and state levels. I visited the Green Hydro demo project in SA and wind turbines in New South Wales. I've met with counterparts in DCC, EEW, DISR, and CSIRO who are working with U.S. colleagues at the Department of Energy Labs, National Science Foundation, NASA, and the U.S. Geological Survey. Minister King is a tireless advocate for international standards that protect the health and safety of workers and the environment, rather than allow unchecked exploitation by state-owned Chinese companies in Indonesia and elsewhere. We can't let vulnerable communities be destroyed and the markets for Australian minerals under the guise of economic development be undermined. The commodities you manage are not only the basis for our economies. Our future national security and the health of our planet depends on them as well, and they are under assault. Fortunately, we are actively mobilizing our political and economic systems to meet this challenge. It's true that democratic governments often move more slowly than we would like, so it's up to the experts in this room and the private sector in both countries to drive change. It's always people on the ground, or in this case, under the ground, who know best what needs to be done. I hope that you will continue to advocate for the crucial investments in the resources sector, in both extraction and processing, and work tirelessly to make the business and financial connections necessary to safeguard our future. There is strong bipartisan support in the U.S. to shore up our supply chains and accelerate the green energy transition. Together, the U.S. and Australia have the financing, the expertise, the scientific and technical advantage, and we have public support. Now is the time to encourage our governments to act and hold them accountable. President Biden often says, it's never a good bet to bet against America. And I'm here to tell you that America is betting on Australia. Together, we can do this, and I look forward to coming back next year and hearing how much has been accomplished. Thank you for having me.